Making use of utility options in Warframe is incredibly useful when you're going about your daily missions. Whether you are a late star chart player or in the middle of your Steelpath grind, having utility gear and options is just handy. So I decided, why not make a video listing all of the utility based gear that I use to make my experience a lot better. Hopefully you pick up a thing or two. I have just made a video on how to not die in Steelpath, so if you have seen that video, you will notice some similarities in here too. So let's start with the list. I will be showing tons of builds in this video. If you don't have certain mods or prime mods, just substitute what you have available and work towards them at your own pace. First up is my personal favorite, the Praedos. Many of you already know of this weapon, but I just have to suggest it. The Praedos is not only a fantastic melee that does ridiculous damage, it's also an amazing utility-based weapon to just slap on your back for all of your missions. And that is because it's one of the old gen incarnates that have 4 evolutions, which allow you to gain 20% sprint speed, 20% slide, and plus 30% parkour velocity. This is a very handy passive bonus that will allow you to move quicker and smoother through your missions with pretty much minimal investment, since it's just a melee. It's a great utility stat stick, and I would highly recommend favoriting it and using it when you don't plan on using another melee or just not using your melee at all. Up next is the Grimoire. Only recently I realized the power of this wonderful book. The Grimoire can hold tome mods, and each tome mod has their own unique effect, but the most amazing one being the Riz Invocation, Vohm Invocation, and Netra Invocation. Each of these mods will provide up to 60% of the respective ability stat when using the Altfire on enemies. This is just a fantastic utility option if you're using a certain frame for whatever you want to use it for, and you just feel like you're missing out on some duration, strength, or efficiency. Especially if you're going for, let's say, a niche setup that requires a ton of focus on one ability stat in your Warframe build, but you're really lacking something else, or you want to push that even further. The Grimoire pretty much just sorts that out entirely. A very good use case for this is snapshotting raw on certain builds to gain that extra 60% ability strength. There are other tome mods that help too, like the Kra Canticle mod. Enemies have a 12% chance to drop a universal orb on death. You also have armor stripping, fire rate, shield recharge, and if you want pure energy regen, Zata Invocation grants you up to 10 energy per second. You don't even need a full build with this weapon. You can just put on the invocation mods and one Canticle mod and lethal momentum, and you're pretty much good to go. But this weapon gets even better. Because the Altfire sends out an electric orb that zaps nearby enemies, this is affected by multi-shot to hit more than once. Slap on secondary fortifier onto the Grimoire, and every time the orb hits enemies with overguard, you gain an extra layer of defense. This is my full utility build that you can use, and honestly, you can drop Isotope for anemic agility if you want more fire rate. Universal orbs and secondary ammo pickups help with the recharge of the Grimoire's Altfire, so that's why I opted for the Kra Canticle. The Grimoire is by far the best utility secondary in the game with what it can offer you. If you're not using your secondary, I cannot recommend this enough to use this book. It is so good. With that being said though, I just want to make a small side section here about secondary fortifier. This arcane is just amazing for adding an extra layer of defense. This can be put on any secondary that you want as a damage based arcane to kind of shred through overguarded enemies easier, and also just to get an extra layer of defense, especially if you're running endurance missions in Steelpath or working towards level cap. Up next is the Amalgam mods. I'm sure many of you are no stranger to these mods, but it's still worth a mention. Amalgam mods offer some really nice utility options. Amalgam Barrel Diffusion being the most prominent with a 60% dodge speed, super handy to slap on your secondary if you're not using it as your main, weapon that you're focusing on for that mission, especially with primers and the Grimoire as well. Amalgam Firax Body Count slapped onto a Firax for secondary fire rate is just great if you want to go all in on your secondary. An Amalgam Organ Shatter for heavy attack wind-up speed for a melee build that doesn't really focus on Tenekai. Something like a Crescendo build would be good for this. Amalgam Serration is okay for its sprint speed, but personally I never found a use for this because I'm a parkour velocity nut. I've never used Argonac Metal Auger, I just never have. And then we have the niche Ripka's True Steel for gore chance when you're using a Necros with Desecrate. Super handy mods to mix and match depending on the weapons that you're using and what setup you're focusing on. Then we move on to primers. I actually want to make a full list of primers as a separate video, but I do want to give a few suggestions here in this video. Primers are incredibly handy and important, not only for condition overload type mods to let you do more damage, basically. Yes, they are definitely the main use for that, make no mistake, but primers actually kind of serve a bigger purpose. High status chance based weapons that can apply as many status effects as possible onto as many enemies as possible is what makes a primer. What status effects you put on said primer is completely up to you. My favorite is to put either corrosive or viral depending on what my main weapon has. Corrosive partially armor strips enemies for allowing you to do more damage. Viral helps you for your damage over time based builds, and not only that, you can also use them to apply radiation, which is a crowd controlled status effect, confusing enemies. You can also apply cold to fully freeze them or slow them down drastically, and you deal more crit damage. And of course, again, it just crowd controls them so they just can't hit you. Electricity stuns enemies, heat even partial armor strips them and causes enemies to panic. You get the idea here? Primers just help you survive easier, and they provide a means to increase your damage against enemies even if you don't have condition overload based mods. The popular primer being the Epitaph is the most used one basically. Here is my build here. Remember, you can just switch out any of these builds to corrosive or another element, but it doesn't matter. You can change it up. The Kuva Nucor build, a compressor build, a twin Comac setup, and finally a Cedo primer. These few are my go-to. Using Shivering Contagion as a means to spread cold is a really good way to stun and CC enemies. The Cedo is the best one for this. And the Cryotra companion weapon is also very, very good because you can put them on there. This leads me on to companions. Now, companions are incredibly useful in any scenario in Warframe. There are lots of companions, so it does come down to what you need in that moment or what you like basically. However, I will say primer companions are just a great option in Steelpath. Deriga with Arc Coil, I've mentioned this so many times in my recent videos. The Hound with Synergized Prospectus is also insanely good. These two are my great primer options that I would suggest to you. But outside of primer options, the Nautilus is just simply amazing for grouping enemies with Cordon and Manifold Bond. Smeeta with the Charm mod for XP gain, and then you can also put the Retriever mods onto the Smeeta as well, and also of course all the other Beast companions. Death Cube for Energy Generator, Worm Prime with Negate to cleanse all status effects, the Adaza Kavat for Cat's Eye, giving you 60% flat crit chance on certain builds, the Pharaoh Predacite with Anabolic Pollination, giving your weapons toxin damage for 15 seconds, and these are just a few options. You of course can try all the other companions with their own unique traits and gimmick. Another thing that is incredibly important with companions is the Synth Deconstruct mod, being pretty much a must-have on any companion build. You see, most late game builds make use of Equilibrium. Synth Deconstruct increases the chance of health orbs dropping from enemies when your companion deals damage to them, which allows you to proc Equilibrium more often, meaning your energy sustain is just significantly better and you don't really have to worry about it much. Bond mods are actually crazy good. Reinforced Bond giving you fire rates, Tandem Bond helping you with melee builds to build your combo easier, Mystic Bond for a companion that uses Manifold Bond to proc its abilities faster to allow you to have better energy sustain. It's just, there is so much here. You can pick your poison, but companions are just filled with utility options to make your gameplay better. And then we move on to parkour velocity and casting speed. Now, I am a huge advocate for these two stats. This is applicable from start chart all the way to the end game in Warframe. I cannot stress this enough. Making use of parkour velocity and casting speed can quite often completely transform a Warframe and how they play. Casting speed can be gained via natural talent or through Archon shards. Parkour velocity can be through Mobilize, Arcane Consequence, Praedos, and Archon shards, and I really cannot stress enough how underrated these two stats are and how they can make your gameplay feel infinitely better. This is of course frame dependent and does boil down to personal preference though. But I have to encourage you, if you are watching this video and you have not made use of these two stats, please do yourself a favor, give it a go and see if you like it. When you do unlock Archon shards, for someone who is watching this video and has not, I know it seems super obvious to those of you who always use them, but Archon shards are just the best for utility and building your Warframe. Let's say you don't want to use Flow in your build. You just put 1 or 2 Tileforge blue Archon shards and you should be good to go. Need just a bit more strength or duration? Put on a red shard. And of course, there are so many more with the green shards, topaz shards, and the violet shards too. This is pretty self-explanatory. I don't need to sell Archon shards to you. Nearly everyone that has access to them always uses them because they are just so good. But if you are someone that does have them and you're not using them, please make use of them. because they are very good. Using focus schools. If you don't have access to Prime Sure-Footed, making use of Poise from Unaru nets you the exact same effect. When I was waiting for Prime Sure-Footed, Unaru was the only focus school that I ran until I got that mod, and I was in Steelpath way before I got Prime Sure-Footed. Vazarin's Protective Sling, making you and your allies invulnerable. Madurai for gaining an extra 40% ability strength to help snapshot certain abilities and more. And of course, focusing on your waybounds for Last Gasp to help you get up if you go down. Focus schools are incredibly important and they are used all the time in your gameplay. Using Magus Anomaly, the operator arcane, as a means to pull enemies in instead of using Nautilus is also another utility option if you want to look that way. And then we move on to set mods. Now there are quite a few set mods in Warframe. You can pick which ones you like and how they affect your loadout, but often you can make use of the Vigilante mod set on your robotic companion weapons and through your Warframe to gain the full effect. This set enhances your primary crit chance from weapons by moving it up by 1 tier when it procs, and the Augur mod set is also often used with shield gating and can be slapped onto your secondary to make shield conversion stronger when you shield gate. Although personally I found set mods to be very niche and very specific and absolutely not needed in most cases, but I did want to kind of add it in here just to remind you that, like, hey, set mods exist. And then for a couple more utility based weapons, being the Rakta Dark Dagger to just simply not die. I mentioned this in the previous video. Melee influence with this dagger is just simply disgusting. You just need to hit an enemy once or twice. It procs melee influence. All enemies are affected by radiation so they don't hit you, and then you have like insane shield scaling that you just can't die. The Coda Base Assist is by far one of the craziest utility and damage based weapons in the game. The Old Fire sends out mites, but it also allows you to perform a teleport finisher attack, and this will then proc your Parazon mods. So Hit and Run, Swift Mercy, and Blood for Ammo are just great options for this. The Aphentus with its unique trait, throwing out the spear gun. If no enemy is hit, it will buff nearby allies with reload speed, fire rate, and ammo maximum, plus minus 50% recoil. Super handy for certain weapons and missions where you need to stay in one spot and you want to focus on your secondaries. Next is the Scourge. Throwing down the spear will cause all enemies within 40 meters to gain a bullet attractor on their heads for 3 seconds. This effect pulses periodically for 20 seconds. Again, absolutely underrated for allowing your secondaries to get the easiest headshots ever. Pretty much no work required. And this is the build that I'm using for this. Finally, a new addition to the game, the Sciotid. Araxia's signature pistols that allow you to group a crap ton of enemies at once, making it one of the best grouping methods in the game by far. They group quickly, it's easy to switch to the Sciotid Altfire and then cast your ability or switch to your desired weapon, or you can just mod them for gas and then the Sciotid shreds them. Either way, it's just an elite pistol. It's brilliant. You gotta use them, you gotta get them. And finally, for the last two things that I would like to just quickly mention, Spectres are great. It depends on what Spectre you want to use. They are incredibly useful, but it comes down to personal preference because I don't personally use them, but I know that they have their place. And then getting the Parallax landing craft to get the Arcane Eye air support ability is absolutely golden. At any point in Warframe, this is just so useful for finding fragments, medallions, item sculptures, and more. It saves you so much time. And that is the list. If I've missed anything, let me know in the comments below, but I hope that you learned something new or at least gained an idea or two on how to incorporate some utility options for your gameplay. You don't need to always use these, this is just options, but it's important to make use of everything in a Warframe that is at your disposal so you can kind of get the full effect of everything and enjoy the full experience. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to our channel members. Thank you for your support, I really appreciate it, and I will see you all in the next video.
Mm-hmm.